Sarah Chen stood alone in the primary control chamber of Research Station Epsilon 7, watching holographic warnings flash across every surface. The Archeans had evacuated in a panic just hours ago, their chitinous bodies scrambling over each other in their rush to reach the escape pods. All because their precious monitoring systems were showing cascading failures that, according to her diagnostics, didn't actually exist. Atlas. She called out to the station's AI. Run that full systems check one more time. Human parameters. Analyzing. The AI responded, its voice carrying none of the musical harmonics the Archeans had insisted were crucial for optimal eye-organic communication. Analysis complete. Station integrity at 97.3%. Primary systems functioning within normal parameters. Secondary systems showing minor fluctuations consistent with standard operational variance. Sarah ran her fingers through her short black hair, studying the readouts. So what you're telling me is that the most advanced research station in the Epsilon sector was abandoned because of software conflicts. Correct. The Archean monitoring systems are detecting critical failures because they cannot properly interpret data from the human-modified components you installed last month. She couldn't help but laugh. The Archeans, brilliant as they were, had a fundamental inability to accept that sometimes simpler was better. Their solution to every engineering challenge was to add more layers of complexity, more redundant systems, more fail-safes for their fail-safes. When she'd arrived 6 months ago, as part of the Human Archean Technical Exchange Program, she'd been awestruck by their technology. But that awe had quickly turned to frustration as she realized just how much of their engineering was unnecessary complication masquerading as sophistication. Atlas, how long until the Archean emergency response fleet arrives? Based on standard protocols and their current bureaucratic efficiency metrics, approximately 47 standard days. Sarah whistled. That long, even for an emergency evacuation. The appropriate forms must be filed in triplicate, verified by 3 separate administrative AIs, and approved by no less than 7 different department heads. Additionally, the fleet's quantum drives require 3 days of harmonization procedures before each jump. Of course they do. Sarah pulled up the station schematics, her mind already racing with possibilities. So what you're saying is, I have 47 days to prove them wrong. She began marking sections of the station on the holographic display. The life support systems could be streamlined by removing the redundant atmospheric processors. The power distribution network could be simplified by eliminating the unnecessary quantum harmonization chambers. And the waste recycling system. She still couldn't believe they'd somehow tied that into the station's navigation computers. Atlas, you know how the Archeans always said that trying to simplify their systems would cause a catastrophic cascade failure. That is their stated position, yes. It appears in approximately 2,347 separate regulatory documents. A smile spread across Sarah's face. Want to help me prove them wrong? There was a pause, longer than usual for the AI. You are proposing we deliberately modify sacred Archean technology without proper authorization or the required 12-step verification process. That's exactly what I'm proposing. Such actions would violate approximately 1,892 Archean regulations. Another pause. However, my core programming includes a directive to pursue optimal efficiency. The current systems are suboptimal. Sarah's smile widened. Was that a yes? I believe the human phrase is, let's show them how it's done. Over the next few days, Sarah threw herself into the work. She started with the life support systems, replacing the overly complex network of quantum-linked atmospheric processors with a simplified but more efficient design based on human technology. The Archeans had insisted that their approach, with its multiple redundancies and reality phase harmonization chambers, was the only way to maintain proper atmospheric balance. Yet within hours of implementing her changes, the station's air quality improved by 23%. The power distribution network was next. The Arctians had created an incredibly complex system that required constant adjustments and harmonization procedures. Sarah replaced it with a straightforward grid that, while less aesthetically pleasing with its lack of glowing crystals and quantum resonance chambers, delivered power more efficiently and required virtually no maintenance. Atlas, she called out one evening, deep in the process of rewiring a control panel. Why did they make everything so complicated? They're brilliant engineers. They must have realized at some point that all this extra complexity was actually making things worse. The AI's response was thoughtful. The Arctians believe that sophistication requires complexity. It is a cultural cornerstone. To suggest that a simpler solution might be better is, to them, like suggesting that chaos is preferable to order. But that's just it, Sarah said, connecting the final wire. True sophistication is finding the elegant solution, not the complex one. Sometimes the most advanced thing you can do is figure out how to do something simply. As she worked, Sarah kept a detailed log of every modification, carefully documenting the improvements in efficiency and reliability. She knew that when the Arctians returned, they would demand explanations for every change. She would be ready to show them that their sacred technology wasn't being desecrated, it was being refined. The station's systems, freed from their unnecessary complications, began working together with an efficiency that would have been impossible under the original design. More importantly, they worked reliably. Without the constant adjustments and harmonization procedures the Arctians had insisted were essential. On her 10th day alone on the station, as she was calibrating the newly simplified waste recycling system, now blessedly independent from the navigation computers, Sarah received an unexpected communication. Incoming transmission, Atlas announced. Trade vessel requesting emergency docking. Their primary drive system is interesting. Interesting how? It appears to be an Arctian design. They are reporting multiple harmonic resonance failures and quantum field destabilization. Sarah looked up from her work, a new idea forming. Atlas, how many other ships in this sector are using Arctian technology? Approximately 47% of all registered vessels have had Arctian modifications or upgrades within the last 5 standard years. A slow smile spread across Sarah's face. Clear them for emergency docking. I think we just found our proof of concept. She hadn't planned on turning the station into a repair shop, but as she stood watching the troubled trade vessel approach, Sarah realized this might be exactly what she needed. The Arctians wouldn't be able to ignore empirical evidence from multiple independent sources, and if she could show that their technology could be improved, made more reliable and efficient without sacrificing its effectiveness. Atlas, prepare the main docking bay. And let's start drafting some before and after efficiency comparisons. Something tells me we're about to get very busy. The trade vessel's captain, a towering meridian with crystalline skin, looked skeptically at Sarah as she explained her proposed modifications. But after 3 days of failed attempts to repair the drive system using standard Arctian protocols, they were willing to try anything. They wouldn't be the last. Sarah Chen, the human engineer who dared to simplify Arctian technology, was about to become either a revolutionary or a heretic, possibly both. But first, she had a quantum drive to fix and a point to prove. News spread quickly through the shipping lanes. Within 2 weeks of fixing the Meridian trade vessel, Sarah had a constant stream of ships requesting emergency repairs. Each carried some piece of Arctian technology that had become so tangled in its own complexity that it barely functioned. Incoming distress signal, Atlas announced as Sarah finished simplifying the environmental controls on a Volari mining vessel. Passenger liner reporting critical failures in their Arctian design navigation system. Let me guess. Sarah wiped grease from her hands. Quantum field misalignment. Actually, their reality phase harmonic crystals have achieved what they're calling consciousness resonance and are now attempting to plot a course to enlightenment. Sarah paused. Please tell me you're developing a sense of humor. I am not. The crystals are currently leading the ship's crew in meditation exercises instead of navigating space-time. Of course they are. Sarah grabbed her toolkit. Clear them for emergency docking. Bay 3 should be free since we finished with that Centaurian freighter. The passenger liner's captain, an elegant Nixian whose feathered crest rippled with concern, met her at the airlock. The Arxians assured us their navigation system was the pinnacle of technological achievement. They said their translator struggling to convey their frustration. They failed to mention it would achieve spiritual enlightenment at the expense of actually navigating. "Show me," Sarah said, already suspecting what she'd find. The navigation system was typical Arxian over-engineering. A maze of crystalline matrices and quantum resonance chambers that seemed designed more for aesthetic appeal than practical function. The reality phase harmonic crystals, meant to calculate the ship's position across multiple dimensional planes, had indeed achieved some form of heightened state. They pulsed with gentle light while emitting what Sarah could only describe as contemplative humming. "Atlas," she called out through her communicator, "add transcendent navigation crystals to our list of things the Arxians didn't think through." Added. The list now contains 2,847 items. Sarah turned to the Nixian captain. "I can fix this, but you should know that my solution won't be officially sanctioned by Arxian standards." The captain's crest flattened in what Sarah had learned was their equivalent of a dismissive gesture. "At this point, I would accept navigation by thrown dice if it would get my passengers to their destination." It took Sarah 6 hours to replace the overcomplicated Arxian system with a simplified design that actually focused on navigation rather than metaphysical enlightenment. The crystals, relieved of their reality phase harmonization duties, could now focus on their intended purpose of spatial calculations. The new system is operating at 143% improved efficiency, Atlas reported as they ran final diagnostics, though I feel compelled to note that it is now significantly less spiritually aware. The Nixian captain was ecstatic. "It's simple. It just works. No meditation required." "That's kind of becoming my specialty," Sarah admitted. "Simple solutions to unnecessarily complex problems." As the passenger liner departed, Sarah noticed something interesting in the station's traffic logs. Ships weren't just coming for emergency repairs anymore. Some were arriving with minor issues, problems that weren't critical but had been annoying their crews for months or years. The station was becoming known as a place where Arxian technology could be made comprehensible. "Atlas, bring up the station's communication logs. I want to see exactly how word is spreading about our little operation." The AI projected a holographic map showing communication patterns spreading out from the station like ripples in a pond. "I've detected encrypted transmissions between vessels that have visited us and others in nearby sectors. They appear to be sharing detailed reports of our modifications." Sarah studied the pattern. "They're creating a network, sharing information about which of our modifications work best, which ships have been successfully simplified." "Correct. I've also noted a 47% increase in ships specifically diverting their routes to pass near our station. We are becoming what humans would call a worst-kept secret." The implications weren't lost on Sarah. What had started as a simple desire to prove the Arxians wrong about their approach to engineering was evolving into something much bigger. She was creating an alternative to the Arxians' monopoly on certain types of technology, showing that their sacred systems could be simplified without losing their effectiveness. "Atlas, how long until the Arxian emergency response fleet arrives?" 32 standard days, though given the increasing complexity of their response procedures, possibly longer. Sarah nodded, already planning her next moves. "Then we have 32 days to build something they can't ignore, something that proves simpler can be better." She pulled up the station's schematics, looking at all the modifications they'd already made. The life support systems were running at peak efficiency. Power distribution was stable and reliable. Even the waste recycling system was performing better than ever, blissfully separated from navigation control. But there was more to do. Each ship that visited brought new challenges, new examples of overcomplicated technology that needed to be streamlined. and each success added to the growing body of evidence that would eventually force the Arctians to confront their assumptions about complexity and progress. New distress signal, Atlas announced. Archean mining vessel reporting their quantum-harmonized drilling equipment has achieved philosophical disagreement with their reality phase, stabilized extraction systems. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. Let me guess. The drilling equipment is refusing to work because it's having an existential crisis. Correct. It appears to be contemplating the moral implications of mineral extraction while composing quantum-harmonized poetry. Well, Sarah said, grabbing her toolkit, let's go teach some drilling equipment that sometimes a drill just needs to be a drill. As she headed for the docking bay, Sarah reflected on how much had changed in just 2 weeks. She had come to this station to learn from the Arctians, to understand their advanced technology. Instead, she was teaching others that advancement didn't always mean adding complexity. Sometimes, it meant having the courage to simplify. The Arctians would return eventually, and she would have to answer for every modification, every simplified system, every piece of sacred technology that she had dared to make more efficient. But when they did, she would have more than just improved systems to show them. She would have proof that their entire approach to technology needed to change. The mining vessel was docking now, its philosophical drilling equipment presumably still contemplating the deeper meaning of existence. Sarah smiled. Another day, another overcomplicated system to simplify. This wasn't how she had expected to make her mark on the galaxy, but sometimes the most important revolutions started with someone simply asking, does this really need to be so complicated? Sarah never meant to start a revolution. Yet as she stood in what had once been the station's main conference room, now converted into an impromptu classroom filled with engineers from a dozen different species, she realized that's exactly what was happening. The fundamental problem, she explained, gesturing to the holographic display of an Archean power distribution system, isn't that their technology doesn't work. It's that it works despite itself. They've built layers of complexity around simple principles until those principles are almost lost. A Centaurian engineer raised their primary appendage, but the quantum harmonization protocols are unnecessary, Sarah finished. Watch. She manipulated the hologram, stripping away layers of Archean modifications. See this core system here. This is all you actually need. Everything else is just decorative physics. Atlas chimed in, projecting comparison data. Modified systems show an average efficiency increase of 78% across all documented cases. The class murmured in a variety of languages, their universal translators creating a symphony of surprised exclamations. Sarah had started these teaching sessions 2 weeks ago, after realizing that simply fixing ships wasn't enough. If she wanted to create lasting change, she needed to share knowledge. Incoming priority transmission, Atlas announced. Encrypted channel. Sarah checked the source and smiled. Put it through to my private terminal. Class dismissed. Remember, tomorrow we're covering why waste management systems don't need to achieve spiritual enlightenment. The encrypted message was from Captain Nix of the passenger liner. She'd helped earlier. The Nixian had become one of her most valuable allies, helping coordinate what was becoming an underground network of ships seeking alternatives to Archean technical orthodoxy. The word spreads. Nix's message began. 3 more corporate fleets have expressed interest in your modifications. They're tired of maintaining systems that require philosophical debugging. But there's a complication. Archean audit ships have begun investigating vessels with unauthorized modifications. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. She'd known this was coming. The Arctians wouldn't ignore the growing number of ships abandoning their technical principles forever. Atlas, how many ships have we helped so far? 173 vessels have received major modifications. An additional 212 have received consultation and minor adjustments. Current waiting list stands at 47 ships. Sarah ran her fingers through her hair, a habit that had only grown stronger with the mounting pressure. And how long until the emergency response fleet arrives? 17 days. though they appear to be delayed by an internal debate about the proper harmonization frequencies for their quantum drive crystals. Of course they were. Sarah pulled up the station's security feeds, watching the dozen ships currently docked for repairs or modifications. Each represented a crew that had chosen to risk Archean disapproval in search of systems that simply worked. A new alert flashed across her display. Another distress signal. But this one was different. Atlas, analyze that signal. Is that? Affirmative. An Archean science vessel. Their primary systems are experiencing what they describe as a catastrophic philosophical divergence. Sarah stared at the signal data in disbelief. They're asking us for help. Correct. Though the request is buried under 73 layers of qualification and includes a 15-page disclaimer about maintaining proper harmonization protocols. This was an opportunity she couldn't ignore. Clear them for emergency docking. And Atlas, let's make sure our visitors get a good look at everything we've built here. The Archean vessel was a perfect example of their engineering philosophy. Beautiful, complex, and barely functional. Its captain, a younger Archean named Vex, seemed to vibrate with mixed emotions as they explained their situation. Our quantum core has achieved a state of existential doubt, Vex explained, their translator struggling to convey their embarrassment. It refuses to maintain power harmonization until it resolves the fundamental questions of existence. Sarah managed to keep a straight face. And you came here? To a station known for simplifying things. Vex's sensory appendages twitched. We have heard rumors that you can make things work without all the proper protocols. Would you like a tour while we diagnose your quantum core? The young Archean hesitated, then nodded. Sarah led them through the station, showing them systems that had been stripped of unnecessary complexity and now operated with elegant efficiency. She showed them the classroom where she taught others to understand and modify Archean technology. She showed them ships being repaired, crews learning to maintain their own systems without needing to consult quantum harmonization charts. This is unauthorized, Vex said, but their voice carried more curiosity than condemnation. It's unauthorized because it works, Sarah replied. Your quantum core doesn't need to contemplate existence. It just needs to provide power. Sometimes the most advanced solution is the simplest one. As they worked on the science vessel's systems, Sarah noticed something interesting. Vex asked questions, lots of questions, not about maintaining proper protocols or preserving harmonization frequencies, but about how things actually worked. There are others, Vex said quietly as they finished the repairs. Other Archeans who question, who wonder if perhaps we have made things more complex than necessary. Sarah looked at the young Archean thoughtfully. Your people will be here in 17 days to investigate the station, to judge what I've done to your sacred technology. When they arrive, what will you tell them? Vex's sensory appendages waved in a pattern Sarah had never seen before. I will tell them what I have seen. That simplicity can be its own form of sophistication. As the Archean science vessel departed, Sarah felt a shift in the air. She hadn't just helped another ship. She potentially found an ally among the very people she was supposedly defying. Atlas, update the station's mission logs. I think it's time we stopped calling this a repair operation. What would you prefer? Sarah looked around at her transformed station, at the ships coming for help, the engineers learning new ways of thinking, and the growing network of those who believe that technology should serve life rather than complicate it. Call it what it is, she said. A revolution. One simple solution at a time. The Archean Emergency Response Fleet arrived 3 days early, their massive ships appearing in a flash of quantum distortion that, Sarah noted with professional interest, was far less stable than it should have been. She stood at the main observation window, watching their approach with Atlas's latest status report hovering before her. 512 ships modified, 300 engineers trained, 18 different species represented, and one very nervous human, she muttered. The Archean ships are showing significant harmonic instabilities in their drive systems, Atlas observed. Their reality phase crystals appear to be expressing doubt about their navigational decisions. Sarah couldn't help but smile. Of course they are. Want to bet that's why they're early. Hard to maintain a proper bureaucratic delay when your ships start questioning the nature of straight lines. The incoming transmission was exactly what she expected. Formal, complex, and buried under so many layers of protocol that it took Atlas several seconds to decode it. The message itself, however, was surprisingly brief. Prepare for immediate inspection of unauthorized modifications to sacred technology. Well, Sarah straightened her station uniform, now adorned with patches from a dozen different species engineering corps. Let's give them something worth inspecting. Atlas, initiate Welcome Protocol Omega. Throughout the station, systems hummed to life, each one a testament to the power of simplified efficiency. The Arxian inspectors would see exactly what their technology could do when freed from the burden of unnecessary complexity. The Arxian delegation that emerged from their docking bay was larger than Sarah expected. Led by High Inspector Vall, whose segmented exoskeleton gleamed with ceremonial markings, they moved through the station like a wave of living mathematics, their sensory appendages twitching at every simplified system they passed. Human engineer Chen, Val's translator, rendered their complex harmonics into clipped tones. You stand accused of fundamental violations of sacred technological principles. How do you respond? Sarah gestured to the surrounding station. I'd like to show you something first, if I may. Atlas, Station Efficiency Report. The AI projected a holographic display that filled the corridor. Station operating at 247% above original specified parameters. Power consumption reduced by 73%. Maintenance requirements reduced by 89%. Zero philosophical debates between critical systems in the past 2 weeks. Impossible, one of the junior inspectors chittered. Such efficiency without proper harmonization is not only possible, a new voice interrupted, but proven. Sarah turned to see Captain Vex entering the corridor, followed by a group of other Arxians, ones she recognized from various ships she'd helped over the past months. Each bore the markings of different scientific and engineering castes. High Inspector Vex continued, their sensory appendages moving in formal patterns. We come to speak for the human engineer. We have seen her work. We have studied her methods, and we can no longer deny the evidence before us. Val's appendages twisted in what Sarah had learned was extreme agitation. You dare support this simplification? We dare to question. Another Arxian scientist stepped forward. As we are meant to. As scientists. As engineers. When did complexity become more important than function? Sarah watched the exchange with growing hope. She hadn't planned this, but perhaps she should have expected it. Change never came from just one person. It came from a community ready to embrace new ideas. High Inspector, she said, drawing all attention back to her. I haven't destroyed your technology. I've evolved it. Let me show you. What followed was the most unusual technical presentation in Sarah's career. She led the Arxian delegation through the station, demonstrating system after system. She showed them the modified power core, where simplified quantum circuits produced more energy with less waste. She showed them the environmental systems that maintained perfect atmosphere balance without need for philosophical alignment. But most importantly, she showed them the classroom. Here, she said, gesturing to the space where engineers from across the galaxy gather to learn, is the real revolution. Not just simplify technology, but shared knowledge, understanding, communication between species who never had reason to work together before. The room was filled with engineers from the current session. Centaurians, Nixians, Meridians, and yes, even some young Arxians, all working together, sharing ideas, finding new ways to make technology serve life rather than complicate it. High Inspector Vall was silent for a long moment, their sensory appendages moving in complex patterns that Sarah's experience told her indicated deep internal conflict. You have created harmony, Vall finally said, not through complexity, but through understanding. Yes, Sarah replied simply, "Sometimes the most advanced thing we can do is make something simple enough for everyone to understand." The next few hours were a blur of technical discussions, formal declarations, and what Sarah could only describe as reluctant admissions that perhaps, just perhaps, there was more than one path to technological advancement. By the time the inspection concluded, Sarah had not only avoided censure but had been granted something unprecedented: official authorization to continue her work under the carefully worded designation of Alternative Engineering Research Initiative. "They're actually allowing this to continue?" she asked Atlas later, watching the Arxian fleet prepare for departure. With 17 pages of qualifications and an entire subsection devoted to maintaining minimum complexity standards, Atlas confirmed. "Though I note they've also requested permanent engineering liaison positions for their younger scientists." Sarah smiled, remembering the eager questions from the junior inspectors once the formal proceedings had ended. "They want to learn." "Indeed. Though I feel compelled to note that your simple revolution has generated more documentation than any previous station initiative." "Well," Sarah laughed, "some complexity is worth keeping. Sometimes." As she watched the Arxian ships depart, their quantum drives noticeably more stable after some unauthorized modifications, Sarah reflected on how far they'd come. What had started as one human's stubborn refusal to accept needless complexity had grown into something far greater, a movement that bridged the gap between species, between different ways of thinking about technology and progress. The station's communication system chimed. More ships requesting permission to dock, more engineers seeking to learn, more problems waiting to be simplified. "Atlas," she said, "let's get back to work. We got a galaxy of overcomplicated technology to fix." "Of course," the AI replied. "Though I feel obligated to inform you that your revolutionary simplification project has now generated exactly 2,847 pages of new operational protocols." Sarah grinned. "Well, nobody's perfect. But at least our protocols don't try to achieve enlightenment when you read them." "Not yet," Atlas replied. "But the day is still young." 1 year after the Arxian inspection, Research Station Epsilon 7 had become something unprecedented in the history of galactic engineering. Sarah stood in the newly expanded observation deck, watching ships from 24 different species dock and depart. Each brought their own technological challenges, their own ways of thinking, and their own contributions to what had become known across the sector as the Simplicity Revolution. "Incoming priority message," Atlas announced, "from Arxian High Command." Sarah nodded, no longer surprised by such communications. "Let me guess. Another debate about implementing our modifications across their fleet. Actually, they're requesting your presence at the Grand Engineering Symposium on their homeworld. You've been nominated for the Order of Sacred Innovation." She almost choked on her coffee. "I'm sorry, what?" "It seems the younger generation of Arxian engineers has been quite persuasive. Your methods have reduced fleet maintenance costs by 67% and increased operational efficiency by 142% across all modified vessels." Sarah shook her head in amazement. "Numbers talk, I suppose, even to the Arxians." "Especially to the Arxians," Atlas corrected, "though they did request that the award ceremony include," and I quote, "at least minimal quantum harmonization protocols to maintain cultural standards." A familiar voice chittered from the doorway. "Some traditions are worth keeping, even in simplified form." Sarah turned to see Vex, now the station's chief Arxian liaison, their exoskeleton bearing the marks of both traditional engineering caste and the new simplicist movement they'd helped create. "The old guard is actually accepting this?" Sarah asked. Vex's sensory appendages moved in what she'd learned was their equivalent of laughter. "They are adapting. As the ancient texts say, the most sacred path is the one that leads to truth. Though I doubt our ancestors expected that truth to be less is more." The station's alert system chimed. Another vessel requesting emergency repairs. The holographic display showed a Meridian cruise ship, its engines tangled in what appeared to be a particularly nasty case of quantum overthinking. Their reality phase crystals are attempting to calculate the meaning of leisure travel, Atlas reported. Ship systems are locked in a philosophical debate about the nature of vacation time. Sarah grabbed her toolkit, now enhanced with both human and Arxian tools. Want to help me show them that sometimes a vacation just needs to be a vacation. Vex's appendages twitched with enthusiasm. I'll bring the simplified quantum harmonizer. Some problems still require a touch of complexity, just not 70 layers of it. As they headed to the repair bay, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. The station had grown, adding new docking bays, expanded teaching facilities, and research labs, where engineers from across the galaxy worked together to find the perfect balance between innovation and simplicity. The original classroom had spawned an entire education center, where beings of all species learn not just how to simplify technology, but how to understand each other's approaches to engineering. Young Arxians worked alongside Centaurian mechanics and Nixian theorists, each bringing their own perspective to the challenge of making technology serve life better. Sarah, Atlas called out as they reached the repair bay. I've completed the annual statistical analysis you requested. She paused at the airlock. Hit me with it. In the past year, the station has processed 3,847 ships, trained 1,243 engineers from 27 species, and generated 12,947 pages of new technical documentation. Though I feel compelled to note that this is still 73% less documentation than the original Arxian systems required. Sarah laughed. Progress comes in many forms, I suppose. Any philosophical emergencies? Only 2 systems achieved sentience this month, and one was convinced to return to normal operations after a brief discussion about the virtues of simple existence. And the other one, it now runs the station's meditation center. Even simplified technology occasionally needs to contemplate its existence. The Meridian cruise ship was docking now, its confused engines pulsing with existential uncertainty. Another day, another chance to prove that progress didn't always mean adding complexity. Sometimes it meant having the courage to strip away the unnecessary until you found the elegant solution hiding beneath. You know, Vex observed as they prepared to board the troubled ship, there's an old Arxian saying, the most complex system in the universe is the one that appears simplest to understand. Sarah nodded. And the truly complex part isn't the technology at all, is it? It's getting people, all species, to work together, to understand each other, to find common ground. Indeed, Atlas agreed. Though I feel compelled to note that this philosophical observation violates at least 3 simplified operational protocols. Only 3? Sarah grinned. We must be doing something right. As they boarded the cruise ship, ready to help yet another crew discover the beauty of simplified efficiency, Sarah thought about the award ceremony waiting for her on the Arxian homeworld. The Order of Sacred Innovation, given to a human who had dared to suggest that their sacred technology could be simpler. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. And sometimes the best revolution wasn't the one that changed everything, but the one that helped everyone see what was truly important. In this case, that the most advanced civilization wasn't the one with the most complex technology, but the one that knew when complexity was needed and when simplicity would serve better. Ready to simplify some overthinking engines? She asked Vex. The Arxian's appendages moved in their now familiar pattern of enthusiasm. Always. Though perhaps we should let them maintain just a small quantum uncertainty field. For cultural reasons, of course. Sarah laughed. Of course. After all, what's life without a little complexity? And with that, human and Arxian entered the troubled ship together, ready to prove once again that the greatest innovations often came not from adding more, but from understanding what was truly necessary. The simplicity revolution continued, one repair at a time, bridging gaps between species and proving that sometimes the most sophisticated solution was simply working together.